What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of the Monday Lineup HQ. Well, I guess Resultsdb review show. We're gonna go back through it all for the American Express. Check out who won all the GPPs, the tournaments, what their player pools look like. Prize pools, everything that they took down, and sort of just find it out. And it's good because got my guy TJ as always back here with me, and we get to go full circle. TJ, we had last week's show. We established some stuff. We did the Wednesday show together. That's why I said Lineup HQ earlier. We were just on that one doing it and going through and checking some things out. And now we get to check our work. So how's it going on this fine Monday, my friend?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I like that we're able to talk on Wednesday, go through our final thoughts, and then put our lineups together. Now we can see how they did. As I said on Wednesday, I took my first shot at the MME streets this week, and it did not go great. But hey,
I was gonna say,
it happens. We can still talk through it, and I'm happy to share my player pool and what I was thinking about. But essentially, decided to go way overweight on Scotty Scheffler and way underweight on Patrick Cantlay, and that in itself is basically a weak loser right there. So it happens, but it was fun. It was fun to do and interesting, and I feel like I might experiment with it more, just because I feel like it also coordinates well with this show, right, and helps me kind of understand better the whole concepts of MME and just makes me a better DFS player as a whole.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, that's some of the stuff we talked about in the past here, just, personally between you and I, and even for everybody to know, that's why I love the show so much, is it definitely forces me into it. It was, something that I pretty much always did with my process anyways. But at the same time, it's getting me better at things that I'm looking at when I'm doing single entry and 3max, which for me, just being open and honest, has always been a struggle. I've, had more success in the MME streets. Like I said, you're doing the opposite. You've been doing the other. It's good for us to play off of it in that sense. And for those watching, they can get a feel for it. And that's why when I see an MME pool and talk through it, it may help you, or when you see some of these high dollar, smaller entry fields, you can talk through that. And that sort of helps me going into the next week. And I think that's just throughout the year, there's a lot of opportunities, right? Sometimes a $5 comes around with a really big prize pool that those that are waiting to jump in or get their feet wet with it, they can do it there. Sometimes for me, it's like a 1K or something where I don't want to play the 2K or the 4K when they come out. I want to play a 1K if it comes out, and I can play in that and get my feet wet that way. So it goes both ways. For those of you that don't know what we're doing here, if it's your first time joining us, it's quite simple. Rotogrinders.com. We're hopping on to PGA. We're going down to Resultsdb. This is a system we've got built into our database, which tracks everything for all the tournaments. You're just simply changing the date back to when the tournament started, January 21st. It's under golf here. It's under classic. And you go to contests. And then all your contests by name and everything are listed here. It's for DraftKings only. Tells you what the prize pool was, the buy-in, first place prize, the max entries you were eligible to put into the tournament, and then how many entries you ended up going up against. I've already loaded them here, so I just wanted to show you that first, but we'll click over where we always start is the big one, right? This is the $12, $200K to first, the $600K guaranteed prize pool approach shot over on DraftKings. Pat Ruvolo took it down here with 3 entries for $200,000. So we'll get to his lineup in a second, but talk to me real quick, TJ. You mentioned the experiment. You did hint it on the Wednesday show we did last week that you were hopping in. Which tournament did you hop into with your MME pool? Is it this one, the $5? Where'd you go?
I just did the $5 drive the green, and that was it. So I'm not trying to invest too much financially early until I get a better feel for, how I'm doing it. So yeah, I was in the $5.
I've got that one up. We're going to go through that one today because I think a lot of people want to see that. And how does it compare? I'm pretty sure I've got it here. I think this is it. I'm just going to pull my tabs over. So we've got it. Yeah, I do. So, all right, we'll start with the $12. Talk to me about Pat Ruvolo's lineup. Congrats to him or her. Big win there. And they've got 682.5. We'll check the theme. Interestingly enough, I saw Fate Bender around this week and I was checking my lineups. So we did a whole sort of case study on Fate Bender last week. He or she, again, was trying to do their thing, but we didn't see them get to the top at the end of it. But talk to me about Pat Ruvolo's lineup. We got Cantlay, and then we've got Siwoo, Harman, Davis, Kirk, Steele. I see something right away, but let's hear your thoughts on this one, and then we'll dissect it a little bit further. 3 entries by the way, total. So $36 to take down 200K plus. We'll see where they got.
That was going to be the first thing I said is to get their own only 3 entries. Again, I feel like we say it every week, but it goes to show you don't need to have 150 to compete here. Like, it can be done on 1 lineup, 3 lineups, 10 lineups. So do whatever's comfortable with your bankroll and check those out. So yeah, right off the bat, I think that obviously started with Cantlay up at the top and then skipped the entire 10K and 9K range and then went super balanced with the lowest guy being 7,300. That was one of the things that I intentionally did this week, was trying not to include anyone under 7K, because I just thought that there wasn't a need to punt this week. We talked about it on Wednesday with the John Rahm withdrawal. There just wasn't the need to pay all the way up and therefore have to dip all the way to the bottom. So can see that this person employed that strategy as well. And then it's an interesting one from an ownership perspective too, because max guy at 20%, and then just kind of a bunch of middling owned guys, right? They don't have the 2%er in there, but they also don't have 3 guys that are 20% plus. So I think total ownership shakes out to be maybe a little bit higher than we usually see, but still I think diversified enough, just with a bunch of players that are not super commonly used. And yeah, I think this is the second time in a row we saw Chris Kirk in the winning lineup too. Is that correct? I think we saw him.
So yeah, he almost got,
or at least in some of them.
Yeah, he was in the mix for sure. I think you nailed a couple of things that stood out for me. No 10, no 9, no 6. So this was, again, heavily, not only last week when we dissected on this same show, Wednesday, like I said, the cool part of getting to come full circle is we went into this directly and saw that these were some of the, we looked at it from this perspective. So if you guys didn't watch the Wednesday show, it's still good to go back and, if you are learning more or putting in some time to put in some research and just practice and stuff, to go back and work on your game, that's one to check out, because we tied this together and we looked at it, and everyone pretty much, all those lineups were using like 3 8K guys, or a mixture of 10, 9, 8, 7, maybe 1, 6, or maybe you could leave out the 6, which was fine, but it was still using someone from every range. And we even said on that show, we saved a couple lineups like this, where we said we're skipping out on 3 ranges, 10, 9, and 6. We're trying somewhere we skip Cantlay completely and the 10Ks and go just the 9s down to the 7s with a little more balance. We really looked at a few different angles from that, and that's interesting to see that get there. Kind of similar to what we usually see, 20 and 15%, couple low teens, well, not teens, a couple below the teens at 12 and 12, and then 2 under 10%. Like you said, just interestingly enough, there's not a 1% or a 2% in there. Wasn't necessary, right? It wasn't required. It still got there. So good to look at that. And then I think the other thing I noticed, just, from, one thing we also talked about was maybe it was more like myself and Kenny on the Fantasy Golf Degenerates podcast, where we're looking at trends and things like that, but it still was trending over time. Enough events, especially the American Express, has a pretty big sample size, was people that had played recently, coming off breaks. We weren't sure with some of these guys. Look, Chris Kirk, Cam Davis, Brendan Steele, Brian Harmon, Siwoo, Cantlay, all these guys have been in the mix. So I definitely like that. I think that was, something that stood out to me as well. So great lineup for Pat Ruvolo with 3, we can go look. I think it's still worth just having a quick glance here. We've got the time, but, just start it over. Make sure. And this, guys, if you haven't seen it, just you click over to ownership. It's got it in the order they finished in the tournament. We're just selecting Pat Ruvolo to see, and you've got here their player pool and what they did. I know it's only out of 3. I'm not trying to say like this is the be all end all, just to show you. Kind of funny, because another thing we also spent a lot of time talking about is how I really don't like committing or over committing. I know it's only on 3 lineups, but they didn't actually lock in anybody. They did do Hoffman and Cantlay were in 2 out of the 3. And then interestingly enough, if we go back, I don't think he was. Yeah, Hoffman was not in the one without Hoffman. Good thing they didn't go all in on Hoffman, because that would have been the difference maker. Hoffman obviously withdrew, which was made the cut and then withdrew, which sucked for a lot of people. I know that, but could have been worse. It could have been me sitting there with Sepp Straka at the same price, who just absolutely did not show up. So you could have been that guy. That was me. So good job to Pat Ruvolo. I want to look at RJ Rat, though. This is something, an RG member. Awesome to see. Second place. Congrats. 70,000. Just look at their pool. And then maybe before we go into the $5 TJ after this, we'll look at your pool if we can over on the $5. But just talk to me about RJ Rat, some stuff you see here. This is their pool. Good for them. Siwoo being the highest owned. But I like that pivot. And we did talk a lot about it on Wednesday. I wrote them up in the expert survey. Bedham talked about that on the Wednesday show as well. So I was happy to hit that. That was little crazy down the stretch. Just side note, Siwoo's a little crazy. He did his interview after and said, I didn't try and get too aggressive. He says, I just tried to stick to my game plan. Mind you, he's driver off the deck. He's going for it on the 16th on the par 5, like putting it right to the left side of the green, close enough to the water and the ridge. Like I thought he was pretty aggressive, but I also like that. I think if that's what got him there, which it did, I talk about this all the time on the Fantasy Golf Degenerates podcast, where you need a step on their throat, man. These other golfers are just too good. And that goes with, a second own guy, Tony Finau. Everyone gives him flack. I love the guy, but it's been a lot of Sundays in the mix where he just doesn't step on their neck and go for it. And Siwoo absolutely went for it, and it paid off. Yes, it can hurt you in the long run, but you got to try it, man. These guys are just too good. Golf is hard, as some say, and that's a way to go about it. So what did you see here with RJ Rat's player pool and just his breakdown?
Yeah, I like what he did here. Strategy of going way overweight on Siwoo Kim. Obviously, that works out extra nice when you happen to do that with the winner. And then the Finau play is a pretty strong one too. It's interesting. We talked on the Wednesday show that we weren't really believing that 16% ownership number, but maybe we should not have doubted it, because it comes in right there at 18%. I guess a little higher than expected, but that's a nice play there to get double the field on Finau. And then Tringali, he was one of my guys that I was heavy on this week. Started off hot and then just like never really got it going over the course of the weekend, bringing it home. I think he had a good Thursday, but then just was pretty mediocre from there. And yeah, then from here, just kind of peppering guys, getting equivalent to maybe slightly over the field on some versus others. And I think a noticeable thing that I'm not seeing is Scotty Scheffler, who was the consensus kind of highest owned play. And I don't know what he had. Scheffler. Yeah, there we go. Full fade of Scheffler, which again, that's great. If you see the play that's going to be the highest owned play and the quote unquote best play, but you're not personally feeling it and you think that the market is wrong and that this guy's the best play, and then you can fade that and you get a missed cut in something like golf, that's absolutely huge, right? Anything can happen in golf, right? We talk about NBA. The studs are never going to go out there and have a complete flop unless they get injured. They're at least going to do somewhat decent. But in golf, it doesn't matter who you are. Anyone can miss the cut any given week, and there's always going to be leverage in that.
Yeah, I think that was huge. Like I said, obviously the full fade there. Just clicking it back real quick. We weren't way off. If you look, Reed was at 25. He dropped to 22. Finau was at 15, up to 18. I just, I expected to be a little different. What it goes to show, and again, we'll talk about it on future shows, but I think the Finau, the DFS darling, if you will, situation is a real thing. And Finau is just loved no matter what the price, what his odds, what he does, if he wins or does. I mean, he doesn't win. He didn't win again. It just, you could say whatever you want. The numbers were astounding. I think this is now 35 top 10s without a win. And the next closest is like 14 or 16. It just doesn't close it out. And that's fine. He missed 2 4-footers. He put one in the water on the same shot that other guys executed, went for it. So I don't know what it is. It is what it is. He's an excellent golfer. Just there's a Siwoo was, SWK, savage, winner, killer. That's what I said it stands for yesterday. It was just, he went for it down the stretch. Some of the shots were savage. Like I said, just the way he went for when others wouldn't. He's a winner. He's been a winner. He's won the Players. He's been in the winner's circle. I know it was since 2017 for him, but he's also super young. You got to remember, people forget. I think someone posted yesterday, he's only a year and a half older than Morikawa or something like that, right? Like he's been out there doing his thing, already won the Players, came second at the RBC Heritage, got some other stuff under his belt. So I think he's an up and comer that we know. He's been working with Claude Harmon, guys that, like Brooks Koepka and Ricky Fowler and those guys have worked with. So sort of taking over the reins. I joked earlier in the, mid last season that Fowler let it go, and Siwoo is who he picked up, Claude Harmon. And now obviously look at Fowler's game and look at Siwoo's. Mind you, Fowler finally had a little bit of a bounce back. He still didn't do anything too fantastic, but good for him. And hopefully he bounces back. It's better for the game of golf when he is crushing it. It can't feel too good to know that all his Puma and Cobra commercials are taken over by Bryson DeChambeau now, but who knows what's in his mind. He's got his own resume that's more than enough. He's got a lot of money in the bank and a good life going for himself. So we're here to continue to talk this player pool, though. I don't think much else to look at here, to be honest. I mean, that's just a good breakdown of it. I want to see here, TJ, if I can find yours. 228, man. You were right in the mix. That's not bad.
Yeah, but man, literally, I guess 6 of 6 was really tough this week, but 6 of 6 and 150 tries. Like, man, I was disappointed by that.
This is
but it's tough.
Hey,
This is
Anybody
why,
that
right?
plays it often, hey, welcome TJ to the MMA.
Yeah, there we
go. That's what it's like. So let's do this, man. Before we go look at the winning lineups here and breaking those things down, let's look at sort of give us your takes, because this is awesome, man. We can actually look inside yours and say, okay, what did you do and what did you think about here and what was your breakdown, and run with it, because this is interesting. I do it every week. We've talked about it in the past. It's interesting to get a different spin on it, especially for those that don't know, like you mentioned at the top, you're literally playing sometimes only 1 to 3 lineups on a given week and playing it in, higher dollar, much lower field entries. And this was a week where you said, look, I'm doing all this content after it. I'm going to go after it with you, Tambo. I'm going to surprise. I'm going to put this pool together and see how it shakes out. And it is what it is. It's hard to win these things, but what were your thoughts, and give us your process sort of going in with looking at it right here? It's 150 lineups with your builds.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So a couple things. First thing you'll see is that I went with a small player pool. I think I had like 40 players, 45 players. So I kept it pretty tight. And my general thesis was that I didn't want anyone in the 6K range. The only person in my pool in the 6K range was my guy, Doug Gim, just because I had to go back to him because he really did a number on me the week before. So I went with Doug Gim, and he ended up working out well there. But everyone else, I stayed above 7K. And then, I mean, clearly it didn't work out, right? But my idea was that I wanted to go on heavy on 2 guys at the top that I thought were good plays with a lot of win equity. And I unfortunately chose Scotty Scheffler as one of those. Whatever, it is what it is. I mean, Cantlay was 1 shot from missing the cut. Like, literally, Cantlay could have missed the cut. Scheffler, I think, parred 8 straight holes down the stretch. All he had to do was make 1 birdie. And it just is, it is what it is, right? It could have gone the other way. But yeah, I went with essentially Scheffler and Im over Cantlay and Finau, which could not have gone worse results-wise, but I do kind of like the process in that, hey, and because it fits my brain better too, because it's kind of like taking my single entry approach, but scaling it wider of like, okay, here are the guys that I like that I'm playing in my single entries. But, my single entry, I had Straka in the lineup. So you have Straka, and he, 1 guy can kill that lineup. So now it's like, okay, let me go in heavy on the guys that I have conviction on, but give myself multiple outs by sprinkling in a bunch of these other 7K, low 8K guys. So I think we also had talked about, I was heavy on Tringali, so I wanted to get way overweight on him. And then that kind of upper 7K range, low 8K range, guys like Hal, Harmon, Zach Johnson, had some conviction on them, so wanted to get them into the player pool. Redmond, I thought about fading Redmond, obviously wish I did, but I just decided to try and get equivalent to the field on him and Burns. And man, I was so close to fading both of them completely and Xing them out, but I thought they were really good plays, and they both missed the cut too. So I think
Burns really sucked because at the end of the week we were spending our time on him, and we just came around to Siwoo, and even you did the same here. You ended up being underweight on Burns, overweight on Siwoo. We didn't know the exact number it was going to come in at. 13% was sort of the range, but I like that. I think one of the interesting things I saw up here was, so twofold. If you look here, remember Tringali was 7,400, as was Straka. And then,
Correct.
Ownership swing was 8%. So I love that you took the stand on your guy, right? That you went for it. The guys at the top or whatever, these are great golfers, great positions, great spots. They didn't work out. Im definitely still came through. It was just Scheffler's the big one. But then you had right behind it, Howell, Harmon, Answer, ZJ, and Streelman even, and all these guys. The reason I brought it up though is because for those that watched the Wednesday show, and TJ, you'll remember it, what we really started to figure out was that every lineup was ending in this $7,400 range and this price point, right? Like it was ending on Hoffman, Tringali, Straka, like all the ownership was in there, and there was not as much on these upper guys or these lower guys, right? Where we could get a little bit different. So it's cool to see that you sort of took that. You still said, look, I'm not going to leave these builds out completely with these $7,400 guys. I'm going to get in on the guys I want, but then I'm also going to make sure I have some of these guys around them so that at least your setup and your structure, construction, I should say, is different based on that, because that's what we noticed last week, right? Every lineup was ending up in the mid 7s. The way to get different was to be in the low 7s or the high 7s or whatever, and then completely get rid of the 6K. So I think it was still well built. I think it's one of those things. And when Scheffler doesn't come through and that's 60% of your lineups, that's going to be a huge issue. You know it.
Right. Like if I decided to X Scheffler and go 60% Cantlay instead, like simple and somewhat reasonable decision I could have made, because I really wanted to explicitly pick one or the other. And yeah, the general thesis is to have your like 4 or 5 guys that you're overweight on, have a chunk of guys in the middle where you're pretty much right around the field, and then have a couple guys where you're taking a stand and fading them. And I just happened to fade Cantlay and Finau, who both finished in the top 5. So yeah, it doesn't work out. It's not going to work out every week, but I still don't feel bad about the process. Like I'm not the kind of guy where it like, kills me that Cantlay had such a good week and that I faded him. And because I love Cantlay and he was a great play, but like you gotta take your stands, and that's how I think I'm going to continue to try and approach this and
you
see
were
how
right
it goes.
there. Like you said, Cantlay literally made the cut basically by 1, and then goes and has himself an incredible weekend. Sunday, he could not miss. We've never seen that.
Crazy.
I mean, the last time we saw Cantlay do that would have been the Memorial when he won. I know he won since then. I forget the tournament now that it just was. It's slipping on. Was it the Zozo? I can't remember what he just won recently. It was a tournament, another one, but where he was leading into it. But I guess that's what I'm saying. When he has these types of weekends, or these days, I should say rounds on a Sunday, it's tough to beat that. And like you said, it was still not a bad fade. Maybe I missed it when you mentioned at the top, because I know you said you were fading the 6K range completely, but was that part of your decision in getting off Cantlay, just because you thought it would bring in more lineups that you sort of had to get the 6Ks involved? Is that where
exactly? Yes. My thought was that to basically fade the top 2 price guys, Cantlay and Finau. And then I didn't fade the whole 10K plus, because I did play some Patty Reed.
Yeah.
Who also didn't work out. But yeah, that was the idea, is that, hey, I'm going to cut off the top, I'm going to cut off the bottom. And I think that, a middling lineup construction is what's best for this. I wasn't really that wrong, because you're seeing in a lot of the builds that won that everybody has, they have Cantlay and then balance from there. But it wasn't like a week where we're seeing $6,300 guys in the winning lineup. So I feel like the general thesis wasn't bad. I just picked the wrong players. And I'm trying to focus more on the theory behind it and the thought process versus, the picking of players, especially in golf, is it's a toss-up a lot of the time.
Yeah, and if you look too, you just mentioned it, like it is, that's all it is. It's Cantlay was in the mix, and then you had to sort of go down from there. This one's, sneaky interesting. So congrats to Big Lucky, an RG member here. 710 blew out the field in this one. And JK123X, as everybody knows, I think he's won the Millionaire Maker a couple times. He's an incredible player. Someone you should definitely be looking into. We can go to his pool in a second here after, just as an experiment. I know Easton. We'll be talking about Easton. This is one lineup in the $5, but trust me, that lineup went in other places. We'll show you in a second. But going to Big Lucky for a second, gotta give some props to the winner here. RG member, 710 points. If you head back to the other tournament there, Pat won with 682 in this tournament, 58,000 entries. This one was less entries and still put up more. So good to see. Good for Big Lucky here. They've got a little bit more unique structure. They didn't quite fade. They played one. They skipped the 10K range, but went answer just above, and then Norlander just below. So definitely another, still a sneaky build when you think about what we talked about, just going like that, like one extra level further, where instead of just fading them completely, let's just fade the chalk within those areas and get it in there. Because then you look here, what's our classic build, man? 2 in the 20s, 2 in the double digits, and in like 12 and 15 range, and then 2 under 10%. So anything here, any thoughts on that, or we want to look at the player pools?
Yeah, this is a classic winning lineup, like you just said. Standard ownership structure, standard kind of pricing structure with, an 11K guy, a 9K guy, an 8K, 2 7s and a 6. Yeah, good lineup, no doubt about that. And then obviously, hitting Michael Thompson and Norlander at the bottom. Yeah, let's check out the player pool. But that's a nice lineup right there.
50, so we'll look at it. Like I said, I love the structure. I like the uniqueness of, even when you do use the 9 and the 6, you use sort of an under-owned in the 6. And then someone that's popular in the 9s, but not, Scheffler popular, let's say, not quite the highest owned, and then making sure you've got some mix in the middle. So knowing that, okay, I'm off Scheffler and Burns, for example, and that's probably enough to be unique, but I'm going to get Cantlay, Siwoo, and Answer in there. And then the other thing too is just circling back again, not saying it's always going to come through, but we did have a pretty good sample size on the American Express. These are all guys that played recently. And I'll bring that up because this was a full field event, man. We had 150 guys out there. We had, guys that we hadn't seen in so long. And this was just to say, forget that. I'm going to play the guys that played recently, even the ones like Michael Thompson and Norlander, who may have done hit or miss, but that's sort of what you want in that setup, right? Where you could have that. So we'll hop over. Well, actually, let's look at JK's lineup because we're going to look at both these player pools quick. We'll look at Easton's after this, but for a different reason. But Cantlay, Casey, Siwoo. Casey we talked about quite a bit, being a little bit unique because no one was on the big name, but had the opportunity. And look at that, just sneakily puts up 95 DK points. Cam Davis, Steele, and then Molinari. Don't forget Molinari. He had himself a huge week, 97.5 DK points at 7,000 straight. So this lineup, TJ's got 20, 15, 12, and then 3 under 10%. But again, no 9s, no 10s, and no 6s for JK 123X. Any thoughts on this one further than that? I mean, I think that's the reason. The only thing I would say, I guess, well, go ahead. Any thoughts on this one? I'll tell you what stands out to me.
Yeah, another nicely built lineup, avoiding that 6K range and the 9K range like we talked about. Casey, I thought was great leverage at only 8%. I think that's probably even lower than I would have expected him to come in at. So nice player there, just taking the long-term form golfer at a pretty reasonable price in a strong field. And then Cam Davis, always popping, our guy right there. He's always someone where when he makes the cut, he can go bonkers at any time and make a ton of birdies. He had a massive Sunday too. I think he shot like 8 under yesterday.
Yeah. Any course with scoring, like I said, he outscores his finishing position by some of the
Every
most.
time.
And so if you're getting him under 8,000, to me, it's almost always worth it no matter what because of that, because it's if he makes the cut, he's going to score. A couple things that stood out for me. One was, again, all guys that played recently, that's the obvious one, or some of them that did. Sorry, not all guys that played recently. We talked about that in the last one. All big names. And the reason I bring that up is because we did talk about this on Wednesday. You could build a lineup with guys like Casey, Steele, Molinari. We joked like Woodland. Guess what? He was up there. We joked about Fowler. He was up there. Not saying they would have made the winning lineup, but again, the names in the field that nobody wanted to play that are just great talents that could pop back at any time. I wasn't expecting this much from Molinari, but obviously this is a guy that was on fire just, a year and a half, 2 years ago, went away for quite some time, it seems, but he's not a bad golfer. So, you could play a guy like him at 7K and take the risk. JK obviously had and the reason I want to bring it up is because we're going to look at his player pool too in a minute and just see what he did with a guy like Molinari, how aggressive he got. But yeah, there was that. And then, skipping those ranges, which we already talked about, 10, 9, and 6, which also forces, some of the fades of Answer, who did fine. He crushed, but I'm saying like Answer, Scheffler, and then not having Scheffler, Burns, and some of those heavier owned guys that we talked about. So we'll look at that in a second. And then also the last thing for me was, we did talk about this quite a bit last week, was the congestion of ownership earlier in the season. And if you look 20, 30, 40, what is this? 40%, 55, we're talking 60%. So he's basically stayed under 60% or around that total ownership. And that was more than enough to push you to the top and get you off some of those plays, especially when a guy like Scheffler is over 30 on his own. So it's a way that you can just get unique there. So let's go off that. Let's get back to this ownership area and check it out here. We'll look at Big Lucky first. See the different approach they had maybe. So we see with Big Lucky, TJ, this is the one, right? We've gone back and forth on this in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Just really balanced, but all this green means overweight, right? You can see all the green, and then all of the yellow is either underweight or slightly underweight. It's not like a red or anything. And it look slightly underweight on Scheffler, right there with Answer, right there with Reed, right to the T actually with Reed, 22.67 to 22.67. But yeah, overweight on Cantlay, went overweight on Patton Kizzire, and then Finau, Casey, Scheffler, Answer, all great golfers, right? All big names. Any thoughts on this one as we look through it?
Yeah, we always talk about the two ways to go about it, right? This is that more balanced route. Also, if you scroll through, they have a pretty small player pool, I would say. And they have one guy at 4%, but everybody else is 10% plus. So it's kind of like, hey, if a guy's making my player pool, I want him in enough of my lineups that if he has a big week, it's going to have an impact, right? So I think that's another strategy that you can employ. I think there's benefits to going all in on a couple guys and then having small sprinkles of others elsewhere. There's also conviction, like, okay, I have conviction on these 30 golfers or 35 golfers, and I want, 10% plus of them in all of my lineups, and I want to build a really solid core. I think that works as well. And it looks to me like also he pretty much played all of the top priced guys I looked like I saw that. Like no big fades of the top players.
Yeah, I'm going to flip to that in 1 second. I actually love the point that you just brought up, though. When you're going this route and you're taking this strategy, even the 4% guy was against a 0.86. But if you just cancel, like, meaning he got way overweight on Chesson Hadley still versus the field. But to your point, and I love it, is it's like, okay, there's Ventura, there's Johnny Hood, there's Norlander, there's Hoffman, there's, all these other guys, Sean O'Hare, Schenk, guys you might be a little bit afraid of going crazy with. But basically he's saying, look, 15 lineups minimum. If I'm in, I'm in. And if Christopher Ventura has a big week, then, which is a guy that went to school with Hovland and Wolf and those guys, it's like, if they're going to be in on them, they're in on them. So they're not just going to have them in one lineup out of that. Like, if you're playing 20 max, put them in at least 2 so that you've got that. If you're playing 150 max, put them in at least 10 plus. This guy, he's going even further and saying 15 plus for everyone except Hadley. But even then, Hadley at 4% is still way over at 0.86. So I do like that. And then just going to the ownership, I want to see a different way. I know we don't have the sortability yet to see it by price point, but some of these guys are up there. In on everyone except Wolf, Henley, and then full fade Doc Redman as well. So as far as ownership, percentages goes of guys that were owned within their range, basically said I'm out on those guys. I like the Wolf one because it was either you were, again, in or out, and that's the way they approached it. So I like that it's almost like when you're building a lineup sometimes in like NFL, you want to tell a story with your lineup. Let me stack it up this way. If this was to happen, that means this should happen. Then I'm going to plug in a secondary stack where those two correlate. It's the same thing here where they're saying, if I'm going to be in on someone like a Christopher Ventura, I'm going to be in on them at least 15 lineups. If I'm going to be out on someone like a Wolf, it's because I feel like the guys around him are better. So I'm just going to pick or choose. I'm not going to take 4% of Wolf just to say I've got some Wolf in the mix. So any further thoughts on this one, or do you want to look at JK?
Not too many thoughts. I just think overall very solid, and I like the strategy that he did here too. It's I just, the MME stuff is really interesting to me because you can really go about it a couple different ways, and all of them are definitely very intelligent and plus EV ways to go about it. So it's great to see these different examples. Let's look at Jake. Yeah, and here we go. Now we got a little bit of the other end, right?
Yeah. And this is very interesting. So we'll get this again. Shout out to Big Lucky. Congrats. Huge win. Love what you do with your player pool there. I think that was incredible. Like I said, just a different way to go about it, but in a great way. Like I said, you take your stands, you play who you're going to play. Not going to work out for you every week, but when it does, it works and it pays off and you win the tournament. So congrats to them. They took it down. That's nice to see. This is more of a style how I employ, right? A couple guys in this range. This is pretty close to how you did it. You went a little bit further by going 60, but again, what's unique, and that's what I said I like this, we're about to get into it here, is the way you did it is the way I like. If you're going to be in on a guy like a 30% owned Scheffler, and we nailed it. I think I put minimum 50 when I did the Lineup HQ show. I said, like, if I'm going to be in on him, he's minimum 50, if not higher, maximum 65, which is where I like to go with my pool if I'm going to someone with heavy ownership. The interesting thing about JK here, again, super sharp player, guy that just crushes all sports all the time. Grinder, I believe he's out of Australia. I know Dan Bach has interviewed him in the past. You can go back and check that interview out. Really interesting stuff. But if you look at it here, he went 48 and 38%, but he's, again, I'm in on these names, and he took those guys we talked about, man, Casey and Woodland, who were big names at 8,700 and 7,700 that seemed extremely underpriced for name and play and just overall golf ability and value here. And it worked out, right? But what are your overall thoughts, just seeing it right out of the gate, and then we'll get into some more of his pool.
Yeah, you can see taking big stands, right, on guys that are super low owned. The Knox one as well there, 26% Knox at less than 2% ownership. So that's I mean, impressive to have that kind of conviction and to go for that. And I like that strategy as well. And then you can see that he sprinkled in a lot of the other plays at kind of right around their typical ownership levels. So seeing and then I'm sure that there are some fades in the mix here. Not seeing
we'll check out the
Scheffler's
fades
name,
in a second, but the Molinari
like the
play I just highlighted because of what we saw, right? Molinari was in his winning lineup. I said, I wondered, is he that aggressive with everything. But now it didn't take long for me to tell. Forget just seeing this at the bottom. That's just for everyone to view it and see, look, he wasn't afraid, but look at the colors, blue, and then everything's green. His top 15 are leveraged in every way possible. So he's getting overweight on all of his plays, right? And some of them really overweight, like you say, not scared to take a stand here, 48-8, 38-4. He's just playing who he wants to play. And if you look at the pool, Casey, Woodland, Im, Answer, Knox, Wolf, Cantlay, Straka, whatever, but Siwoo Kim, Tony Finau, Ricky Fowler, Cam Champ, and I know I'm keep naming them all off, but if you look, these are all big name golfers in the world of golf. And it's not saying he took it right off the OWGR chart, but as far as official world golf rankings go in a field this week overall, this is some of the best golfers in the world that he took stands on. So I guess it's like you said, you know, willing to go down with the ship if it doesn't quite pan out. So I like to see that. Even, you know, underweight on Reed, but big name golfer. And then sort of then he's mixing in, but again, still taking a stand on all of these guys. Just going back here quick. Let me have a look. Yeah, full fade Scheffler.
Yep.
So here's your ownership, and you can see what he's up against with what he did with the highest owned guys in the tournament. And it's enough right out of the gate just to fade Scheffler. I don't know. Like, what's your thoughts? Because you and I were both so heavy on Scheffler and overweight on him. Everyone was at 30%. I guess it's like you said, golf and anything can happen. But what do you think is the thought process behind just completely fading? It's just saying, you know, forget it. I'm over it. There's other guys there. Because I don't know. Like it was like Answer was right behind him, and he still got to the field on Answer. So I don't know. I guess it's just the obvious is like you said, anything can happen in golf. But for me, I still like to still have a piece of that because it's also a spot where, like you said, he missed the cut by what was it, 1, and had, you know, 2 par 5s and 8 holes down the stretch that he parred out that we just needed 1 birdie. And then who knows what happens on the weekend. So I guess it's just the anti-sweat of the Patrick Cantlay position where you could have missed the cut, makes it by 1 the other way and does what we could have had that flip-flop. And then it's Scheffler doing it for a guy like you at 60%.
Yep.
So
exactly. No, I think specific to Scheffler this week, I really did like him. I thought that he was a really strong play. So I personally was never considering fading him. But in general, I do like that concept of picking at least one of the top owned and top priced golfers and full fading them. I think you don't have to, but I personally like the idea because again, it's like if that guy then misses the cut, like that's huge. And so I think that's the difference. There's no such thing as a floor in PGA DFS, right? No golfer really has a high floor like we would say in other sports because they can miss the cut and then they're automatically going to be one of the lowest scoring players in the entire field. So specific to the Scheffler play, I was all in on him and wanted to get overweight on him, but theory wise, I think it's a sharp move. And again, like I could have easily, you know, decided to fade Scheffler and go 60% Cantlay. I wish I would have done that, but hey, it is what it is.
Yeah, and then the next week you do that and it goes the other way, right? You've seen it so many times.
Exactly,
We just saw it with Doug Gim. Everyone, you went back to Gim, which was awesome. But like you said, everyone was off him. What was he? He went way down.
He was 2%, and he was like 20% the week before in some of the smaller
week before,
field
and that's what I said. Then it flip flops, and then someone says, "Oh, I can never get him right." It's like, well, if you liked him the week before, the possibility is always there. I think, like you said, just one thing to point out is just that, you know, I've talked about this in the past plenty. Like Scheffler didn't miss the cut because he was 30% owned. He just missed the cut because you can. The theory is, like you just said, is there's always the opportunity. So when you've got a guy that high owned, the potential is there. But like I said, it stood out to me as just cheap price, too good of a play for me to leave out. I looked to build accordingly and use him and not maybe use him as we showed some of those groups on Wednesday with Burns or with some of the other guys that were going to be higher owned in that range, Im and all that area. So there's ways you can go about it. There's more than one way to get it done, but I think that's definitely a nice fade and worked out for them this week. I wanted to bring up Easton. We're not going to stick around here too much longer, but this is awesome to see. So this is the $44 buy-in, the Club Twirl, 50K up top. Congrats to Easton 136 RG member. Taking it down with that same single bullet we saw back in the other one. I forget where it was now. It might have been the $12, 657. Yeah, 16th there. We went to the $5, 5th there, but he just basically played the single bullet game and got it done. But if you look at this, it's a who's who right? Awesemo, Broflex, Beef Stew, Stripper Lover is always kicking around in the Millionaire Makers and stuff. And my boy Circling the Drain, the Fate Bender, our guy that we just talked about last week, M. Pendle. These are super sharps that are all in the mix here, whipping around with their lineups. And Easton got it done with the single bullet, man. So check it out. It's Cantlay, it's Siwoo, Harmon, Davis, your boy Tringali, and Taylor Gooch. And I think if you look at it, Tringali, did his best effort to really screw everybody over that played him, but still managed to show up in this lineup. Didn't need quite as much because we're at a 53.01 versus the other tournaments having, 20,000 plus. But the main thing is back to what we saw, right? No 10K, no 9K, no 6K, but they also didn't need the less than 10% ownership guy.
Yeah. Yeah. First off, I love the single bullet, right? Taking that one lineup and putting it into multiple. That's something that he actually won the I just looked, he won the single entry too. Yeah.
He won the $200 or no,
Yep.
he won the 555 for
he won the $200 too. Oh, he won. So this lineup won a lot of stuff.
Single entry. Yeah. Just, that's what I was going to show off next. We're not going to have time to get to the $3.20 max. I keep saying we're going to dive into it, and I want to. This stuff does all apply, guys. Just remember what we're talking about here. You can bring it across and then follow my Wednesday show where I'm actually going to put it into play and talk about the rules, the exposures, the build setups, everything you can do. But yeah, shout out Easton before we just keep going with it there. Won the $200 single entry, which was, great. And then won the 555 again, where you could put up to 18 entries in. And again, Jake Evans, a stud, all these guys, NY Knicks was up there. Awesemo. All these Fate Bender was up there again, like quite the turnaround for Fate Bender. And then J Knob, shout out to them. They had a bunch of lineups up there, just didn't get one to the top. But yeah, back to this in the club twirl, Easton. Yeah, just player pool to look at here. It's just goes to show, I think, used $100 less than the salary, but played the guys they wanted to play, avoided the heavy chalk, didn't go heavier than 20% on Cantlay, and then stayed underneath. And still got unique and still did enough to take down all of these tournaments for, what was it, over 200,000? We just looked at 150,000. So lots of money on 1 week spin, being in for what, $1,000, $2,000, and turns into almost 200,000. So any final thoughts here, TJ, on this? And then before we get out of here.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really solid lineup, and you can definitely tell it's a single entry build, right? Not going crazy off the board with any of these individual plays. Everyone was someone that was kind of in consideration for me for single entry and 3 max, but at the same time, like you said, avoiding the mega chalk plays. No Scheffler, no Redman, so I like that. No Burns, really dodged.
And even some of those did good, but like you said, they dodge. When you do it this way, not to cut you off, but you dodge the bullets. You may dodge some good plays too. Like I said, M is not someone who did bad. The idea is if you wanted Cantlay over M, you did better, and you basically ended up at the top. And then Siwoo already crushed everybody by winning the thing. So I think it's just like you said. It's they took a single entry build. And I'm not sure if this is how they looked at it. I can't speak for them, but I honestly do, see it right now in front of me and say, if I built this lineup and you just put our thoughts, that's what I love that we brought it full circle here together, TJ, is that use what we talked about last Monday, looking at these types of builds. Then on Wednesday, we saw what were the common builds and how could you build against that. This says, look, even if Scheffler does his thing, or even if Im does his thing at these higher ownerships, or Reed, I still think I have a build that uses all of the fundamentals. I skip the chalky 9K range. I skip the guys that are being used in the 10K range. I don't go down and try and find this diamond in the rough. Then that says a couple things. One, you like the build. And two, you actually think, and you can, I think this out loud right now, is that this build would work in any tournament because it's leveraging the same ownerships in all of them. Even though, yes, you could go to a 2K and see that, Scheffler would have even higher ownership. That's the whole point. If it could work there and it could work down at the bottom in the $5, it could work anywhere. So why not just plug it into everything and take your chances? And then again, like you said, use some pretty great golfers without, quote unquote dumpster diving or going to find this special gem or diamond in the rough. So really like that. Let everyone know where they can find you, TJ, what you got going on this week as far as content is concerned, and then we'll get out of here.
Yep. My last thought on this lineup is I'm realizing that if I if I had Cantlay in my player pool, I very likely could have ended up spitting out this lineup because I was on all 5 of the other guys. So
yeah,
it's a game
Next
of
week,
inches, as they say.
that's all we got this week, man.
Yeah,
We got a great tournament coming up this week. I know
I'm
pricing
pumped.
probably just dropped while we were on here. It'll come out soon, but we'll spend some time on that in the future as well. I think that's the thing, with a lot of content coming out Tuesday, Wednesday, everything that we've got going on. So again, let us know where we can find you and what else you've got going on this week.
Yep. Find me on Twitter at TJL5124 DFS. Really need to get more active on there. I never tweet, so maybe I'll start to get in the Twitter streets a little bit more. I only have like 200 something followers, so if you're out there, give me a follow. I'll maybe start to get a little bit more involved in those streets. And then the value article will be coming out tomorrow, as always, on Tuesday. And excited for another week of PGA DFS.
Yeah, big week up ahead, guys. Excited for it. Like I said, lots of content. I got the Fantasy Golf Degenerates podcast. We'll be out overnight tonight with Kenny Kim, as always. Then I got tomorrow, we're going to do the DFS show with myself, Noto, and Cards. And then Wednesday, I'll have a guest on the Wednesday Lineup HQ show where we're going to, again, try and put these things together, put them into action, and just see how you can get after builds like this. It doesn't mean they're always going to pay off or you get to have a week like Easton 136, but we all hope to do so each week, every week we're out there. So find me on Twitter at ToeTagginTambo. Hit me up if you guys have any questions. Other than that, thank you and good luck.